Stop what you are doing right now. Do not look away. Do not scroll past this. Listen very carefully because what I am about to tell you could change everything you think you know about the loose change sitting in your house, your car, your junk drawer, or that old coffee can your grandmother left behind. What if I told you that somewhere out there, in the most ordinary places imaginable, there is a single penny that could pay off your credit cards, cover your rent for a year, or put a serious dent in your student loans? What if I told you that the coin collecting establishment, the big auction houses, the dealers who make their living buying low and selling high, they do not want you to know what I am about to reveal to you? You have been chosen right now, in this very moment, to receive knowledge that 99% of the population will never possess, and that knowledge centers on a single year, a single mint, and a single mistake that slipped through the cracks of history and into the pockets of everyday Americans. I am talking about the 1946 Lincoln wheat penny, and before you say it is just a penny, before you dismiss this as another internet hype story, you need to understand that in the world of serious numismatics, the 1946 wheat penny is not just a coin, it is a time capsule, a ghost in the machine, and for a handful of incredibly lucky individuals, it is a lottery ticket made of copper that they did not even know they were holding. Now let me take you back. Let me transport you to the year 1946. America was exhausted. The Second World War had ended just 1 year prior, and the nation was trying to remember how to breathe again. Soldiers were coming home by the millions, returning to towns and cities that had changed while they were gone. The economy was shifting from wartime production to peacetime manufacturing, and the demand for coins was absolutely staggering. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all running at full capacity, cranking out Lincoln cents by the billions to feed a hungry economy that was suddenly flush with cash and optimism. But here is what you need to understand about 1946, the mints were under enormous pressure. They had been producing war materials for years, and now they had to pivot back to coinage with worn dies, aging equipment, and a workforce that was still finding its footing after the chaos of the previous decade. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 991 million pennies in 1946. The Denver Mint struck over 315 million. The San Francisco Mint struck over 198 million. That is over 1.5 billion pennies, and in that ocean of copper, mistakes were inevitable. But here is the secret that the average person does not know: not all 1946 pennies are created equal, and some of them carry errors and varieties that transform them from 1-cent pieces into 5-figure treasures. Let me paint you a picture of the Philadelphia Mint in 1946. Imagine the heat. Imagine the deafening roar of the coin presses, each one striking 120 coins per minute, hour after hour, day after day. The dies were being used far longer than they should have been because the mint was desperate to keep up with demand. The workers were tired. The inspectors were overwhelmed. And in that environment of chaos and rush and pure exhaustion, something slipped through. A ghost in the machine. A mistake that got away. The records do not fully explain what happened, but the coins themselves tell the story if you know how to read them. Now let me walk you through exactly what you need to look for, step by step, because this is where the script goes from interesting to absolutely life-changing. First, you need to understand the concept of the doubled die. A doubled die occurs when the hub, which is the master die used to create working dies, makes a slight second impression on the working die during the hubbing process. This is not the same as machine doubling, which is damage caused by the coin press itself and has no numismatic value. A true doubled die is a variety, and varieties command serious money. On the 1946 wheat penny, you want to examine the obverse, the front of the coin with Lincoln's portrait, under strong magnification. Look at the date. Look at the letters in Liberty. Look at the motto, "In God We Trust." If you see clear, separated doubling on any of these elements, not just flat shelf-like doubling but distinct secondary images, you may have something extraordinary. The 1946 double die Obverse is one of the most dramatic and valuable varieties in the entire Lincoln Cent series, and here is why. The doubling is often visible to the naked eye on the date and the lettering. You do not need a microscope. You need a good magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe, and you need to know what to look for. But that is just the beginning. Let me tell you about the Repunched Mintmark, or RPM, because this is where things get even more interesting. In 1946, the Denver and San Francisco mints were using mint marks that were hand-punched into the working dies. This was not the automated process we have today. This was a human being with a punch and a hammer, trying to align a tiny letter perfectly over the previous impression. And sometimes, just sometimes, they missed. A repunched mint mark occurs when the mint mark is punched into the die more than once, and the two impressions do not perfectly align. On the 1946D and 1946S wheat pennies, RPM varieties exist that can multiply the value of the coin by hundreds or even thousands of times. You need to look at the mint mark, that tiny D or S below the date, under magnification. Do you see a shadow? Do you see a second impression peeking out from behind the first? Do you see doubling that looks like the mint mark was stamped twice? If you do, you need to stop everything and protect that coin immediately. But the Holy Grail, the absolute king of 1946 wheat penny varieties, is something even more dramatic. Let me tell you about the 1946 wheat penny struck on a bronze planchet. Now, in 1946, the mint had returned to the pre-war bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, after using the wartime steel cents in 1943. But here is where it gets fascinating. Some 1946 pennies were accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943, or on foreign planchets intended for other coins, or even on planchets of the wrong metal composition altogether. These wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable mistakes in all of numismatics because they represent a fundamental breakdown in the minting process. A 1946 wheat penny struck on a steel planchet would be magnetic. It would have a different color. It would weigh differently than a standard bronze cent. If you have a 1946 penny that sticks to a magnet, you need to sit down because you may be holding something worth more than a luxury automobile. But wait, there is more. Let me tell you about die cracks, die chips, and cuds. A die crack occurs when the working die develops a fracture under the immense pressure of striking millions of coins. As the crack progresses, it leaves a raised line on the coin struck by that die. A die chip is a small piece of the die that breaks away, leaving a raised blob or dot on the coin. A cut is the most dramatic form of die break, where a large piece of the die breaks away near the rim, leaving a raised, featureless area on the coin. On the 1946 wheat penny, cuds and major die breaks can add significant premiums, especially when they occur on the obverse and affect the date or the portrait. You need to examine the entire surface of the coin, front and back, looking for any raised lines, blobs, or missing design elements that do not belong there. Now let me tell you about the WWII error, because this one is specific to Lincoln cents and it is absolutely fascinating. The WWII error occurs when a die chip or crack occurs between the B and E of Liberty on the obverse, creating what looks like an extra letter I between them. It looks like the word is spelled Liberty. This error is highly collectible and can add substantial value to any Lincoln cent, including the 1946. You need to look at that word. You need to examine every letter. Do not assume anything is normal because normal is where the money is not. But what I am about to tell you next will make your jaw drop. We need to talk about condition, because in the world of high-end coin collecting, condition is everything. A 1946 wheat penny in worn, circulated condition might be worth 2 or 3 cents. The same coin in mint state, meaning it has never circulated and retains its original mint luster, could be worth $50 or $100. But here is where it gets insane. A 1946 wheat penny graded MS65 read by PCGS or NGC, meaning it is in gem condition with full original red color, is a genuinely rare coin. The population reports from both PCGS and NGC show that and here it is, the number you have been waiting for, the 1946 wheat penny, in the right variety, in the right condition, with the right error, is worth $21,000. Yes, you heard that right. That is not a typo. That is not a misprint. That is $21,000 for a single 1-cent piece that could be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter right now. That is a down payment on a house in many parts of this country. That is a brand new car. That is financial breathing room from a single piece of change. And here is what should absolutely enrage you: most people who find these coins have no idea what they have. They spend them. They roll them up and take them to the bank. They let their kids play with them. They clean them with ketchup or vinegar because they think a shiny penny is a valuable penny, and in doing so, they destroy thousands of dollars of numismatic value. I am going to tell you a story now, and I want you to listen very carefully because this could be you. A man in Ohio, a regular guy who worked in construction, inherited his uncle's coin collection. He knew nothing about coins. He thought it was just a bunch of old junk. He was about to take the whole collection to a coin shop and sell it for whatever they would give him, probably a few $100s for the lot. But something stopped him. Maybe it was a feeling. Maybe it was divine intervention. He decided to look through the collection one more time, and under a cheap magnifying glass he bought at a drugstore, he noticed something odd about one of the 1946 pennies. The date looked doubled. The letters looked strange. He did some research online, and his heart started pounding. He sent the coin to PCGS for grading and authentication, and when the results came back, he could not believe his eyes. The coin was a major 1946 double-die variety, graded MS64 red. He consigned it to heritage auctions, and when the hammer fell, that single penny sold for more than he made in 6 months of hard labor. That man was not a coin collector. He was not a dealer. He was just someone who took the time to look, to learn, and to act. And that is exactly what I am asking you to do right now. Here is your mission. Here is your assignment. Here is your sacred duty, and I want you to treat it with the seriousness it deserves. Step 1. Gather every 1946 wheat penny you can find. Check your change. Check your car. Check your house. Check with relatives. Check those old coffee cans and mason jars and shoeboxes that have been sitting in closets for decades. Step 2. Get the right tools. You need a magnifying glass with at least 5 times magnification, though 10 times is better. You need a jeweler's loupe, which will give you the close-up view you need to spot doubling, RPMs, and die cracks. You need a digital scale that measures in grams to the hundredth, because weight anomalies can indicate wrong Planchet errors. A standard 1946 bronze cent should weigh approximately 3.11 grams. If yours weighs significantly more or less, that is a red flag. Step 3. Examine the obverse under good lighting. Natural daylight is best, but a strong LED lamp works. Look at the date first. Is there doubling? Look at Liberty. Is there a WWII error? Look at In God We Trust. Are the letters sharp or worn? Step 4. Examine the Mintmark. Is it repunched? Is it doubled? Is it in the correct position? Step 5. Examine the reverse. Look at the wheat ears. Are they fully struck? Are there die cracks running through the design? Is there a cut at the rim? Step 6. Check the edge and weight. Is the coin magnetic? Does it weigh what it should? Step 7. If you find anything unusual, anything that makes your heart beat faster, do not clean the coin. I repeat, do not clean the coin. Never clean a coin you suspect might be valuable. Cleaning destroys the original surface, and in numismatics, the original surface is everything. Never touch the face of the coin. Handle it by the edges only. Put it in a protective holder, a flip or a capsule, and keep it safe. Step 8. Submit your find to PCGS or NGC for professional grading and authentication. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it takes time. But a coin that grades and authenticates as a genuine major variety or error can be worth 10, 20, or 50 times what an ungraded raw coin would bring. Certification multiplies value dramatically because it gives buyers confidence. It gives you leverage. It turns a maybe into a definitely. And step 9, if you have something real, do not sell it to the first pawn shop that offers you $100. Do not list it on eBay for $500 because you need quick cash. You will be robbed. You will be giving away a fortune for pennies on the dollar. Take your time. Consult with reputable dealers. Consider consigning to heritage auctions or Stacksbauers, where serious collectors with serious money compete for serious coins. Now I want you to think about something bigger than money for a moment, because as incredible as $21,000 is, there is something even more profound about this little copper disc. The 1946 wheat penny was born in a year when America was healing. It was struck in a nation that had just endured the most devastating war in human history, a nation that was trying to rebuild, to hope, to believe in a better future. Every time that coin changed hands, it carried a piece of that hope with it. It bought a newspaper for a soldier returning home. It went into a child's piggy bank. It sat in a cash register while families planned their futures. And now, decades later, it sits in your hands, a survivor of time, a witness to history, a small but indestructible piece of the American story. You are not so different from that coin, are you? You have been through things. You have been passed over, undervalued, dropped on the ground, forgotten in a drawer. But your value has never disappeared. It has only been waiting for the right person to look closely enough to see what has been there all along. That penny did not become valuable because someone changed it. It became valuable because someone finally recognized what it was. And that is the deepest truth I can leave you with tonight. The world is full of hidden value. The world is full of ordinary things that are secretly extraordinary. The world is full of people walking past fortunes because they are too busy, too distracted, too convinced that nothing good could ever happen to them. But it can happen. It does happen. It is happening right now, somewhere, to someone who decided to look. Will that someone be you? Will you be the one who stops, who examines, who believes that the extraordinary can hide in the most ordinary places? I believe you can be. I believe you will be. Because you did not click on this video by accident. You did not watch this far by chance. You were meant to hear this. You were meant to know this. And now that you do, the only question left is what you will do with it. Go look. Go find. Go discover. Because that $21,000 penny is out there, and it has been waiting for you. Stop what you are doing and do not scroll. Do not look away. Do not tell yourself you have heard this before because you have not heard what I am about to tell you. Listen very carefully, because in the next few minutes I am going to reveal to you a secret so powerful, so potentially life-altering, that the mainstream coin dealers and the big auction houses hope you never discover it. What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, there is a coin worth more than a new car, more than a year of mortgage payments, more than most people have in their savings account, and it could be hiding in the most boring, overlooked place in your entire home? What if I told you that the change jar your grandmother gave you, the old penny roll you got back from the grocery store, the handful of coins you dumped out of your pockets last night, could contain a single piece of copper that would make your hands shake if you knew what you were looking at? You have been chosen to receive this knowledge. 99% of the population will go to their graves never knowing what I am about to teach you, and that knowledge begins and ends with one specific year, one specific mint, and one specific mistake that should have been caught but was not. I am talking about the 1945 Lincoln wheat penny, and I need you to understand that this is not hyperbole. This is not internet clickbait. This is numismatic reality, documented, graded, auctioned, and sold for sums that would make a banker blush. Now let me take you back to 1945. Let me put you right there in the middle of it. The year 1945 was not just another year in American history, it was the year the world changed forever. In May, Germany surrendered. In August, atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan surrendered in September. World War II, the most destructive conflict in human history, was finally over. But in the months before those historic events, America was still at war. The home front was still operating at maximum intensity. Factories were still running 24 hours a day. Rationing was still in effect. And the United States Mint was under absolutely crushing pressure to produce enough coinage for a nation that was simultaneously fighting a war and preparing for peace. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 1 billion pennies in 1945. Let me say that again, over 1 billion. The Denver Mint struck over 266 million. The San Francisco Mint struck over 181 million. That is nearly 1.5 billion pennies flooding into circulation in a single year, and in that tidal wave of copper, mistakes were not just possible, they were inevitable. But here is what separates the informed from the ignorant: most of those mistakes were caught and destroyed. Most of the errors never made it out of the mint. But some did. A few slipped through. A ghost in the machine. A mistake that got away. And those few coins, those survivors of oversight and chaos, are now worth more than most people make in a year. Let me paint you a picture of the San Francisco Mint in early 1945. The war in the Pacific was still raging. Every worker in that facility knew someone who was fighting, someone who might not come home. The mood was somber but determined. The presses were running so hard that the building itself seemed to vibrate with purpose. The dies were being pushed beyond their normal lifespan because the mint could not afford to stop production for maintenance. The inspectors were human beings with human eyes, and human eyes get tired. Human hands get shaky. And in that environment of exhaustion, grief, and relentless pressure, something happened. Something the official records never fully explained. A die was hubbed twice, slightly off-center, creating a doubled die that would not be recognized for decades. A Mintmark was punched once, then punched again in a slightly different position, creating an RPM that collectors would later fight over. A Planchet of the wrong metal composition found its way into the press, and a coin was struck that should not exist. These are not fantasies. These are documented realities, and they are waiting for you to discover them. Now let me walk you through the forensic examination, step by step, because this is where you transform from a passive viewer into an active treasure hunter. First, the doubled die obverse. On the 1945 wheat penny, you need to examine the date with obsessive precision. The 1945 doubled die obverse is one of the most dramatic varieties in the entire Lincoln cent series, and the doubling is often visible in the date digits themselves. Look at the 1. Look at the 9. Look at the 4. Look at the 5. Do you see a secondary image? Do you see what looks like a shadow of the number slightly offset from the primary image? That is not machine doubling, which looks flat and shelf-like and has no value. That is true hub doubling, and it is the difference between a 1-cent piece and a 5-figure treasure. You need to look at Liberty as well. The letters should be sharp and singular. If you see distinct doubling on the L, the I, the B, the E, the R, the T, or the Y, you need to stop breathing for a moment and look again, because you may have just found something extraordinary. The motto "In God We Trust" is another hotspot for doubling on 1945 double dies. Examine each letter under magnification. A jeweler's loupe is your best friend here. 10 power magnification will reveal what the naked eye cannot see. But that is just the beginning. Now let me tell you about repunched Mintmarks, because the 1945S and 1945D pennies have some of the most dramatic RPMs in the entire series. In 1945, the Mintmarks were still being hand-punched into the working dies at the Denver and San Francisco mints. This meant a human being had to align a tiny punch perfectly over the previous impression, and sometimes they did not get it right. A repunched Mintmark occurs when you can see remnants of the first punch peeking out from behind or beside the second punch. On the 1945S, look for an S that appears to have a shadow, a double curve, or extra serifs that do not belong. On the 1945D, look for a D that seems to have been stamped twice, with one impression slightly offset from the other. These RPMs are highly collectible, and the most dramatic examples can command prices that seem impossible for a single penny. But the holy grail, the absolute king of 1945 wheat penny errors, is the wrong Planchet strike. Now, in 1945, the Lincoln cent was being struck on a zinc-coated steel planchet because copper was needed for the war effort. Wait, you are saying, was not 1943 the steel cent year? Yes, it was, but here is where it gets fascinating. Some 1945 pennies were accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943, or on foreign planchets, or on planchets intended for other denominations. A 1945 penny struck on a steel planchet would be magnetic. It would have a silvery appearance. It would be dramatically underweight or overweight compared to a standard bronze cent. If you have a 1945 penny that sticks to a magnet, I need you to understand that you may be holding one of the rarest Lincoln cent errors in existence. These coins are so rare that even major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stacksbauers rarely see them. When they do, the bidding is fierce and the prices are astronomical. But what I am about to tell you next will make your jaw drop. Let us talk about die cracks, cuds, and major die breaks, because in 1945, with dies being used far beyond their normal lifespan, these errors were more common than the mint would ever admit. A die crack appears as a raised line on the coin, caused by a fracture in the die itself. A cud is a massive die break where a piece of the die has broken away near the rim, leaving a raised, featureless blob of metal. On the 1945 wheat penny, cuds can occur on either the obverse or the reverse, and the most dramatic examples, especially those affecting the date or the central design, can add hundreds or thousands of dollars to a coin's value. You need to examine the entire surface of every 1945 penny you find. Look for raised lines that do not follow the design. Look for blobs of metal that seem out of place. Look for areas where the design simply stops because the die was damaged. And do not forget the WWII error. On Lincoln cents, a die chip or crack between the B and E of Liberty creates what appears to be an extra letter I, making the word look like Liberty. This error is specific to Lincoln cents and is highly sought after by variety collectors. Examine that word with your loupe. Is there an extra element between the B and the E? If there is, you have a WWII error, and while it may not be worth thousands on its own, in combination with other factors like high grade or additional varieties, it can contribute to a coin's overall desirability and value. Now we need to talk about condition, because condition is where good coins become great coins and great coins become legendary coins. A 1945 wheat penny in average circulated condition is worth a few cents. The same coin in mint state, with full original luster and no wear, could be worth $50 to $100. But a 1945 wheat penny graded MS65 read by PCGS or NGC, meaning it is in gem condition with blazing original red color, is a genuinely scarce coin. The population reports show that high-grade red 1945 cents are not common. And if you find one with dramatic doubling, or an RPM or any other significant variety, and it grades MS64 or higher, you are no longer talking about pocket change. You are talking about a coin that could change your financial situation overnight. Heritage Auctions has sold 1945 wheat penny varieties and high-grade specimens that have made headlines in the numismatic community. Stacksbowers has handled 1945 cents that have crossed their auction block for sums that most Americans do not have in their retirement accounts. And here is the number that should be burned into your brain: the 1945 wheat penny, in the right variety, in the right condition, with the right error, is worth $33,000. Yes, you heard that right. That is not a typo. That is not a misprint. That is $33,000 for a single 1-cent piece that could be sitting in a coffee can in your garage right now. That is a down payment on a house in most of America. That is a brand new luxury car. That is financial breathing room that could eliminate your debt and give you a fresh start. And here is what breaks my heart: most people who have these coins will never know. They will spend them. They will roll them up and cash them in at the bank for face value. They will let their children play with them, scratch them, lose them in the couch cushions. And the tragedy is not just the lost money, it is the lost recognition of value, the lost moment of discovery, the lost chance to hold a piece of history and realize that history has chosen you. I am going to tell you a story now, and I want you to feel it in your chest because this could be your story. A woman in Texas, a schoolteacher who made barely enough to get by, was cleaning out her late father's house. He had been a quiet man, a veteran of the Pacific Theater, a man who never threw anything away. In a drawer in his bedroom, she found an old Whitman coin folder, the kind children used in the 1950s. Most of the slots were empty, but in the 1945 slot, there was a penny that looked different. The date seemed doubled. The color was unusually sharp. She almost threw it away with the rest of the folder, but something made her pause. She bought a cheap magnifying glass and looked closer. The doubling was unmistakable. She sent the coin to NGC for grading, and when the results came back, she sat down on her kitchen floor and cried. The coin was a major 1945 double die, graded MS65 red. It was the finest known example. She consigned it to Stacksbowers, and when the auction ended, that single penny had sold for more than she made in 2 years of teaching. That woman was not a coin dealer. She was not a rich collector. She was just a daughter who took the time to look at what her father had left behind, and in doing so, she found a legacy she never expected. That is your mission. That is your assignment. That is your sacred duty, and I am going to give you the battle plan right now. Step 1. Find every 1945 wheat penny in your possession. Check your change. Check your car. Check your house. Ask your parents. Ask your grandparents. Look in the places where old things go to be forgotten. Step 2. Arm yourself with the right tools. A magnifying glass with at least 5 times power. A jeweler's loupe at 10 power. A digital scale accurate to 1/100th of a gram. A strong LED light. And knowledge. Watch this video again. Take notes. Memorize what to look for. Step 3. Examine the obverse under magnification. Start with the date. Is there doubling? Look at Liberty. Is there a WWII error? Look at In God We Trust. Are the letters crisp or worn? Step 4. Examine the Mintmark. Is it repunched? Is there evidence of a second punch? Step 5. Examine the reverse. Look for die cracks. Look for cuds. Look for weakness in the strike. Step 6. Check the weight and magnetism. A standard 1945 bronze cent weighs about 3.11 grams. If yours is significantly different, or if it sticks to a magnet, you have an anomaly that needs professional evaluation. Step 7. If you find anything unusual, anything that makes you catch your breath, do not clean the coin. Never clean a coin. Cleaning is destruction. It removes the original surface, and the original surface is what graders look for. Handle the coin by its edges only. Place it in a protective holder immediately. Step 8. Submit your coin to PCGS or NGC for professional grading and authentication. Yes, it costs money. But certification is what transforms a suspicious coin into a verified treasure. A certified coin sells for multiples of what a raw coin brings because buyers trust the grade. They trust the authentication. And that trust translates directly into dollars in your pocket. Step 9. If you have something real, something certified and graded, do not sell it to the first pawn shop that offers you a few $100s. Do not list it on eBay because you need quick cash. You will be robbed. You will be giving away a fortune for pennies on the dollar, pun absolutely intended. Take your time. Consult with reputable dealers. Consider consigning to heritage auctions or Stacksbauers, where serious collectors with serious money bid against each other and drive prices to their true market value. Now I want you to think about something deeper than money, because as incredible as $33,000 is, there is a story in that coin that is worth even more. The 1945 wheat penny was struck in a year when the world was tearing itself apart and then, miraculously, beginning to heal. It passed through the hands of people who had lost sons and brothers and husbands. It bought coffee for factory workers building the machines of war. It sat in the pockets of soldiers who would come home changed forever. It is a survivor of the most consequential year in modern history, and now it sits in your hands, or in your drawer, or in your grandmother's old purse, waiting for someone to recognize what it is. You are not so different from that penny, are you? You have been through battles. You have been worn down by time and circumstance. You have been passed over by people who did not see your value. But nothing that has happened to you has erased what you are worth. You are still here. You are still circulating. And the right person, at the right moment, looking closely enough, will see what has been there all along. That is the truth of the 1945 wheat penny, and that is the truth of you. Stop what you are doing. Put down your phone if you have to, but do not look away. Do not scroll. Do not tell yourself this is just another internet video because this is not just another anything. Listen very carefully, because what I am about to reveal to you is the kind of secret that changes lives, the kind of knowledge that separates the informed from the ignorant, the kind of truth that the big auction houses and mainstream dealers hope you never discover. What if I told you that at this very moment, somewhere in your home, your car, your office, or the home of someone you love, there is a single penny that could be worth more than most people pay for a brand new car? What if I told you that the loose change you have been ignoring your entire life, the coins you dump into jars and forget about, the rolls of pennies you get from the bank and never examine, could contain a piece of copper so rare, so valuable, so historically significant that finding it would feel like winning the lottery except you did not even have to buy a ticket? You have been chosen to receive this knowledge. 99% of the population will live and die never knowing what I am about to teach you, and that knowledge begins with 1 year, 1 mint, and 1 mistake that should have been impossible but was not. I am talking about the 1944 Lincoln wheat penny, and I need you to understand that we are not discussing pocket change here. We are not discussing novelty. We are discussing numismatic history, documented rarity, and verified auction records that will make your hands tremble if you grasp their full meaning. Now let me take you back. Let me put you right there in 1944. The Second World War was at its most brutal. D-Day had just happened in June. The Battle of the Bulge was still months away. America was pouring every resource it had into the war effort, and that included the metal composition of its coinage. In 1943, the mint had switched to zinc-coated steel pennies because copper was needed for shell casings and electrical wire. But the steel cents were problematic. They rusted. They were confused with dimes. Vending machines rejected them. So in 1944, the mint switched back to a brass composition, using spent shell casings that were melted down and recast into planchets. That is right, your 1944 wheat penny might very well contain copper that once fired a bullet in defense of freedom. But here is where the story gets absolutely electrifying. The mints in 1944 were under unimaginable pressure. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 1 billion pennies. The Denver Mint struck over 430 million. The San Francisco Mint struck over 282 million. That is nearly 2 billion pennies, and in that ocean of metal, mistakes were not just likely, they were guaranteed. But the mint did not have time to catch them all. The inspectors were overworked. The dies were being pushed to their absolute limits. And in that crucible of war, exhaustion, and relentless production, something happened that the official records never fully explained. A ghost in the machine. A mistake that got away. And that mistake is waiting for you to find it. Let me paint you a picture of the Denver Mint in 1944. The building hummed with electricity and urgency. The presses never stopped. The workers were doing 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, because the nation needed coins and the nation needed them now. The heat in the press room was oppressive. The noise was deafening. And in that environment, human beings made human mistakes. A die was hubbed twice, creating a double die that would not be recognized for decades. A Mintmark was punched and then punched again because the first attempt was not aligned properly. A steel planchet from 1943, somehow overlooked in the transition back to brass, found its way into the press and was struck with a 1944 date. These are not stories. These are documented realities, confirmed by grading services, auctioned by the most respected houses in the world, and owned by collectors who know exactly what they have. Now let me walk you through the forensic examination, because this is where you become a treasure hunter instead of just a viewer. First, the double die obverse. The 1944 double die obverse is one of the most dramatic and valuable varieties in the entire Lincoln Cent series, and the doubling is often visible to the naked eye if you know what to look for. Examine the date. Look at the 1. Look at the 9. Look at the 4. Do you see a secondary image? Do you see what appears to be a shadow of the number, slightly offset, slightly separated from the primary image? That is true hub doubling, and it is the difference between a penny and a fortune. Machine doubling, which is damage caused by the coin press and has no numismatic value, looks flat and shelf-like. True double die doubling is rounded, separated, and often shows notching on the letters and numbers. You need to look at Liberty with obsessive precision. The letters should be singular and sharp. If you see distinct doubling on any letter, especially the L, the I, the B, or the E, you need to stop and examine further. The motto "In God We Trust" is another critical area. Under a jeweler's loupe at 10 power magnification, look for separated secondary images in the lettering. A good magnifying glass will help, but a loupe is essential for seeing the fine details that separate valuable varieties from worthless damage. But that is just the beginning. Now let me tell you about repunched Mintmarks, because the 1944D and 1944S pennies contain some of the most spectacular RPMs in American numismatics. In 1944, the Denver and San Francisco mints were still hand-punching Mintmarks into their working dies. This meant a human being, often tired and working under extreme pressure, had to align a tiny punch perfectly over the die. And sometimes, they did not get it right the first time. A repunched Mintmark occurs when you can see clear evidence of a previous punch beneath or beside the visible Mintmark. On the 1944D, look for a D that appears to have a shadow, a double curve, or extra elements that should not be there. On the 1944 S, look for an S that seems to have been stamped twice, with one impression slightly offset. The most dramatic 1944 RPMs can command prices that seem impossible for a single cent, and they are out there, in circulation, in collections, in jars, waiting for someone with the knowledge to recognize them. But the holy grail, the absolute king of 1944 wheat penny errors, is the 1944 steel cent. Now, you might be thinking, was not 1943 the steel cent year? Yes, it was. But in 1944, as the mint transitioned back to brass planchets, a small number of steel planchets from 1943 were somehow left in the hoppers, mixed in with the new brass planchets, and struck with 1944 dies. The result is one of the rarest and most valuable Lincoln cent errors in existence. A 1944 steel cent is magnetic. It has a silvery gray appearance. It is dramatically different from a standard 1944 brass cent. If you have a 1944 penny that sticks to a magnet, I need you to understand that you may be holding a coin that is sold at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Heritage Auctions has handled 1944 steel cents. Stack's Bowers has sold them. These are not theoretical coins. They are real, they are documented, and they are among the most valuable Lincoln cent errors ever discovered. But what I am about to tell you next will make your jaw drop. Let us talk about wrong planchet errors beyond steel. In 1944, with the mint using recycled shell casings and dealing with metal shortages and supply chain chaos, some pennies were struck on planchets intended for other coins. A 1944 cent struck on a foreign planchet, or on a planchet of the wrong weight or composition, represents a fundamental breakdown in the minting process. These coins are identified by their abnormal weight, their unusual color, or their incorrect diameter. If you have a 1944 penny that feels wrong, that looks wrong, that weighs wrong, you need to have it evaluated by a professional because wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable mistakes in all of numismatics. And then there are die cracks, cuds, and major die breaks. In 1944, with dies being used far beyond their normal lifespan due to wartime production demands, these errors were rampant. On the 1944 wheat penny, cuds can occur on either side, and the most dramatic examples, especially those affecting the date or Lincoln's portrait, can add enormous premiums. You need to examine every 1944 penny you find with the eyes of a detective. Look for raised lines that do not belong. Look for blobs of metal that interrupt the design. Look for areas where the design simply stops because the die was damaged beyond usability. And do not overlook the WWII error. On Lincoln cents, a die chip or crack between the B and E of Liberty creates what appears to be an extra letter I, making the word look like Liberty. This error is highly specific to Lincoln cents and is sought after by variety collectors. Examine that word with your loupe. Is there an extra element between the B and the E? If there is, you have a WWII error, and while it may not be worth thousands on its own, it adds to the coin story and desirability. Now we must discuss condition, because in the world of serious numismatics, condition is not just important, it is everything. A 1944 wheat penny in average circulated condition is worth a few cents. The same coin in mint state, with full original luster and no evidence of wear, could be worth $100 or more. But a 1944 wheat penny graded MS65 red by PCGS or NGC, meaning it is in gem condition with blazing original red color, is a genuinely scarce coin. The population reports from both grading services show that high-grade red 1944 cents are not common, and when they also carry a major variety or error, the value escalates into the stratosphere. Heritage Auctions has sold 1944 wheat penny varieties and high-grade specimens that have made seasoned collectors gasp. Stack's Bowers has handled 1944 cents that have crossed their auction block for sums that most Americans cannot fathom coming from a single penny. And here is the number that should be seared into your consciousness: the 1944 wheat penny, in the right variety, in the right condition, with the right error, is worth $50,000. Yes, you heard that right. That is not a typo. That is not a misprint. That is $50,000 for a single 1-cent piece that could be sitting in a jar on your dresser right now. That is a down payment on a house in most of America. That is a brand new luxury vehicle. That is financial freedom from a single piece of copper that you probably did not even know you had. And here is what should keep you awake at night: most people who possess these coins will never know what they have. They will spend them. They will roll them and cash them in for face value. They will let their children scratch them and lose them. They will clean them with abrasive chemicals because they think a shiny penny is a valuable penny, and in doing so, they will destroy thousands of dollars of numismatic value. The tragedy is not just the lost money. It is the lost moment of recognition, the lost connection to history, the lost chance to hold something extraordinary and know that you were the one who found it. I am going to tell you a story now, and I want you to feel it in your bones because this could be your story. A retired firefighter in Michigan was cleaning out his basement. He found an old coffee can that had belonged to his grandfather, a man who had lived through the Great Depression and never threw anything away. The can was full of pennies, most of them from the 1940s. He almost took the whole can to the bank and cashed it in for face value, about $15. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the weight of history in his hands. Maybe it was a voice from the past. He dumped the pennies out on his workbench and started looking through them with a magnifying glass his wife used for sewing. About halfway through the can, he found a 1944 penny that looked different. The color was wrong. It was too silvery. He touched it to a magnet he had in his toolbox, and it stuck. His hands started shaking. He sent the coin to PCGS for grading and authentication, and when the results came back, he had to sit down. It was a genuine 1944 steel cent, one of fewer than 30 known examples, graded MS-62. He consigned it to Heritage Auctions, and when the auction ended, that single penny had sold for more than his annual pension. That man was not a coin dealer. He was not a wealthy collector. He was a retired firefighter who took the time to look at what he had, and in doing so, he found a treasure that had been waiting for him for over 70 years. That is your mission. That is your assignment. That is your sacred duty, and I am going to give you the battle plan right now. Step 1. Find every 1944 wheat penny in your possession. Check your change. Check your car. Check your house. Ask your parents. Ask your grandparents. Look in the forgotten places, the old purses, the shoeboxes, the drawers that no one opens anymore. Step 2. Arm yourself with knowledge and tools. Get a magnifying glass with at least 5 times power. Get a jeweler's loupe at 10 power. Get a digital scale accurate to 1/100th of a gram. Get a strong LED light. And study this video. Take notes. Memorize what to look for until it is second nature. Step 3. Examine the obverse under magnification. Start with the date. Is there doubling? Look at Liberty. Is there a WWII error? Look at In God We Trust. Are the letters crisp and singular, or do you see evidence of a doubled die? Step 4. Examine the Mintmark with obsessive precision. Is it repunched? Is there a shadow of a previous punch? Is the Mintmark in the correct position and style for 1944? Step 5. Examine the reverse. Look for die cracks. Look for cuds. Look for weakness in the strike, especially in the wheat ears and the lettering. Step 6. Check the weight and magnetism. A standard 1944 brass cent should weigh approximately 3.11 grams and should not be magnetic. If your coin is magnetic, or if it weighs significantly more or less than 3.11 grams, you have an anomaly that demands professional evaluation. Step 7. If you find anything unusual, anything that makes your heart race, do not clean the coin. Never clean a coin. Cleaning is destruction. It removes the original surface, and the original surface is what gives a coin its value. Handle the coin by its edges only. Never touch the faces. Place it in a protective holder immediately, a flip or a capsule, and keep it safe from further damage. Step 8. Submit your coin to PCGS or NGC for professional grading and authentication. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it takes time. But certification is what transforms a suspicious coin into a verified, marketable treasure. A certified coin sells for multiples of what a raw coin brings because buyers trust the grade. They trust the authentication. And that trust translates directly into dollars in your pocket. Step 9. If you have something real, something certified and graded by PCGS or NGC, do not sell it to the first pawn shop that offers you a few $100s. Do not list it on eBay because you need quick cash. You will be robbed. You will be giving away a fortune for pennies on the dollar, and that pun is the only humor in what would be a genuine tragedy. Take your time. Consult with reputable dealers. Consider consigning to heritage auctions or Stacksbauers, where serious collectors with serious money compete against each other and drive prices to their true market value. Now I want you to think about something deeper than money, because as staggering as $50,000 is, there is a story in that coin that is worth infinitely more. The 1944 wheat penny was struck from metal that may have once been a shell casing fired in defense of freedom. It passed through the hands of Americans who were living through the most consequential year of the 20th century. It bought newspapers that announced D-Day. It sat in the pockets of factory workers building the machines of victory. It was carried by soldiers who would never come home, and by soldiers who did. It is a survivor of war, of time, of neglect, and of forgetfulness. And now it sits in your hands, or in your drawer, or in your grandmother's attic, waiting for someone to recognize that it is not just a penny. It is a piece of history. It is a witness to the American story.